I used to tell them three pillars of the documentation. That is the public, right? The audience, the form, what is the type, the document that we are trying to write, and also the style.
Welcome to the Knowledgebase Ninjas podcast, where Gowri Ramkumar of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Our guest today is Paulo Victor, Senior Lead Technical Writer at Nubank. Welcome, Paulo, to the Knowledgebase Ninjas podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited to be here. Thank you.
Super. So let's get started now, Paulo. I know it's early morning for you. And once again, I appreciate all the time you're sharing with us today. So just explain a little bit more about yourself, Paulo, and how did you initially got into documentation?
All right. I'm a senior lead technical writer at Nubank. Nubank is the largest digital bank in the world, the biggest biggest bank in Latin America. Firstly, I started as a developer. As soon as I finished my high school, I started working as a developer. So I come from an engineering background. So I started working as a developer, and I did it for almost 10 years, approximately. And then I moved to a different place. I moved to Canada to study a little bit more about English. And then I just, fell in love with the language and how we can express ourselves with that language. And as soon as I came back to Brazil, I wanted to mix my both passions together and to put all of them in one single place. And then I found the technical writing field. I was in love at first. And then since then, I started, little by little, learning, getting bigger and bigger. And today I'm working at Nubank.
That's really great to hear, Paulo, coming from a development background and turning into a technical writer. I think it brings the flavors from both the world. So what is your documentation process at Nubank, and which teams do you normally get involved in this process?
We usually work with the different approach from the usual when they have some technical writers dedicated to specific teams, working closely to the content creation. Here in Nubank, we find that this is not a sustainable approach because we have over than 600 engineers. So if all the technical writers wanted to produce the content from them, that would be a mess. So the approach that we have here is a more supportive approach where we kind of deep dive into specific teams. We spend some time with them, teaching them, best practices, guidelines, and everything else related to documentation. We also present them our templates. We provide them with review and etc. in order to enhance the engineers' writing skills. So we usually adopt a rotative deep dive approach. We usually spend some time with a specific team, and then we move to another. The technical writing area here at Nubank, it's pretty new. So our first step here is to enhance the writing culture of the company. We find that this is very important.
Mm-hmm. Super. So I know you are the first technical writer at Nubank, right?
Yes.
So what is it like being the first professional in this area for such a large organization?
Yeah, it was very, very, very challenging because, I spent the first months only trying to understand the company first, and then to understand the needs of the company, the pains that engineers are passing through, So, the first months are basically study, learning, and etc. in order to develop an approach that fits the company. So it was pretty challenging, but I had all the support from my teammates, from my colleagues, and etc. not only helping me to understand the company, but afterwards, they helped me to enhance my team, to increase the number of members of my team. So now we have a very big team of not very big, but we have a decent team of technical writers. And this is the biggest challenge, to understand the company, to be part of the company, and then to understand the pains that the people are passing through. But it's pretty challenging, but it's awesome anyway.
Nice, very nice. I really like the way you put this. Take the first few months to learn, understand what the environment is, and then introduce any techniques or tools. So if we can talk a little bit more on that, with such evolving or where writing is a new aspect to the organization, what techniques did you use to foster that environment?
Yeah, the first pains that I got from the users is that the documentation was hard to find, was all scattered around, was messy. So I came up with some concepts like single source of truth that was pretty important for them because findability was a problem. So we took into consideration single source of truth. We also using docs as code, because they are very used to work on GitHub and etc. So docs as code was very good for them, especially in order to keep documentation up to date. And we could bring some best practices, especially because English is not our native language. So we usually we have some tricks and etc. So our role here was also to teach the people how to write in English and how to walk on the reader's shoes. Sometimes an engineer, when they write, they don't think about the user. They tend to use complex words, complex concepts. And when you talk to them now, you have a target audience and you have to write in a different way. They, sometimes they don't even know it. And we could be a lot supportive in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And while talking about the techniques, let's also talk about some of the important factors you consider or considered while creating your documentation.
Usually you have to think about, I used to tell them 3 pillars of the documentation. That is the public, right? The audience, the form, what is the type, the document that we are trying to write, and also the style. Is it more formal? Is it more, informal? It's more about engineering. It's a more public article and etc. So I usually come with these 3 pillars to show them the basics of technical writing.
Mm-hmm. That's always nice, going back to basics and just doing from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Super. And also, what type of information architecture do you tend to use as a strong base for writing documentation?
Usually, we adopt an internal architecture. We use some in-house tools for documentation. So we have our proper arrangement of the information here. We usually split the types of content in different types of platforms. So if it's a more regarding engineering, we just share it in a specific platform. If it's a different content, more regarding to the product, to the business decision records and etc., we have a different platform for that. And we just find a way to have all these platforms centralized in one single place, like a gateway, like an entrance. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of hub of information that we have, a centralized place when it redirects you to different platforms of different kinds of content that you may need.
Fantastic. I think we've spoken a lot about processes and how do you create documents and important things to consider. Let's talk a little bit more about your team. You did mention that you were the first writer and then you have a team now. So can you talk a little bit about how do you report on your documentation and who do you generally report to?
Yes. Now we have a team about 10 technical writers in our chapter. It's an unofficial chapter. And we are usually dedicated to specific products. So, for example, we have a technical writing working for the bank account. We have a technical writer working for the credit card, and etc. And I work for the platforms team. And I'm not the only one on platforms. I'm not the only technical writer. So I have another technical writer that reports to me. We are just rotating inside our product, the teams inside our product. And I report to the director of engineering, that is the head of my team. So basically, he's not a technical writer. So he can rely on me that all the stuff regarding technical writing are just rolling on.
Nice. And also, you've been in this writing space for a long time. So in your opinion, what has been the most important innovation when it comes to document tracking?
I think all the CMS tools, they are pretty awesome. They can do everything that you want regarding documentation, versioning, publishing, and etc. But the most interesting thing that I would mention is that, I told you I started as a developer over 10 years ago. And I used to work with waterfall documentation. And now I'm tending more to agile documentation. So I think it's a fantastic innovation, because waterfall was really, really painful to write documentation because it was just abstract, And now we work in a more reactive way. So I like it. I think, just like the word says, it's agile, So I think that's the biggest revolution regarding documentation. And also the community. The community is just growing and growing faster and faster all over the world, especially here in Brazil. We don't have many technical writers here in Brazil. It's a brand new thing here. So I'm really, really glad to see how it's growing up.
Fantastic. So it's an emerging market and opportunities for a lot of youngsters to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Many people are just diving into this new role. Some people that never thought about it, looking for courses on the internet to learn more, to get information about how it works. It's just fantastic.
Nice. And also it's agile is also nice, right? You get involved right in the beginning of design phase for the products and also projects. It gives you more visibility of what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. One thing I forgot to pick up during the conversation is all your documentation public, or do you protect it against a password and a username for your customers only?
Currently, we work only with internal documentation about our products and etc., just for internal consuming. But it's part of our plans to work for some external documentation aiming the general public, especially when someday move to the platforms operations and etc. I think that this is going to be used by all the people. So at this point, we intend to open some of our documentation.
Nice. I think I wanted to know if there are any organic search traffic being generated from your documentation, but sorry,
yeah,
it looks
not
like
now. Not now, but when we reach the final public, of course, it's going to be very important.
Very true. And for organizations like yours, it could be a big driving factor on how the quality is and what should be added, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And also because, public documentation can be a source of revenue of a company if you do it in a proper way.
Very true, Paulo. So with that, we are kind of coming to an end to the generic questions, but I do have a rapid fire round with just 3 simple questions to answer. But would you like to add anything else that I have missed to ask you?
No, the questions were very good. I just would like to thank you, to provide me this time to talk about my career, about my job, and also to enhance the community of technical writers. That's fantastic.
Nice. Let's shoot off our rapid fire questions, and I'll keep it very simple. So my first question is, who have you learned the most about documentation from in your career?
About a very friend of mine, and also a colleague, André Sato is a very good technical writer here from Brazil. He writes some interesting articles. He's got some really new perspective of the area. So I learned a lot with him.
Nice. Can you share a documentation related resource you have consumed recently?
Yes, we have some, the content from the technical writing Brazil community. It's very, very good. We have many people writing new articles, new courses about technical writing. It's a very, very, very good community. It's very active community. Also, I like some famous blogs like I'd Rather Be Writing. With all of them, you can get some precious information. That's the kind of content that I consume.
Nice. Just to please remind me, did Andrew Etter participate in the podcast as a guest a few months ago?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, because the name clicked me, and that's why I just wanted to check with you. Fantastic. Nice to have you both as guests. And so my very last question is, what is the one piece of documentation related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
I would say to invest on documentation. When I started working with, as I told you before, waterfall documentation, I found that this is gonna finish someday. It's not gonna survive, because it's so overwhelming. But as soon as we moved to a different technology and different approach of software development, the things became much easier regarding documentation. And I would say, keep doing documentation. It's going to be easier in the future.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Super. So I think with that, I'm done with all my questions for this podcast, Paulo. Anything else you would like to add to our audience before we say bye to them?
No, I just would say, don't lose the passion for writing. Writing it's one of the main ways of communication. So it's not about writing for your product, your software architecture. It's about writing. It's about communication. I want to enhance people's communication over writing. This is very important for us as society.
Very nicely put, Paulo. So thank you once again for your time and some of the hints and tips you gave us in the last 20 minutes or so. And with this, we would like to conclude the podcast and enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you very much, Gowri. It was really good. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledge-Based Ninjas podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.